Good morning. Today is Sunday, the 18th day of Nisan. It is the second day of Chalamayit. And yesterday, the 17th day of Nisan, we started chapter 41 in Tanya. So we're going to learn today both the yesterday's lesson and today's lesson. Let's begin with tzedakah again. Gedola tzedakah, shemikarev es geula. Tzedakah brings Mashiach closer. This chapter, 41, is a very fundamental chapter in the Tanya. In fact, the Rebbe encouraged people on many occasions to memorize the first part of this chapter. The chapter talks about the importance of having the fear of God, the awe of God, as the principal base of our service of Hashem. It should be based on the understanding of the fear of Hashem. And he is going to explain in detail why this is so. And in fact, the Alter Rebbe explains, we explained in the last chapter, that in order to do the mitzvahs, one must do the mitzvahs with feelings, awe and fear of Hashem, and love of Hashem, the love and fear. And he mentions that this love and fear of God is considered like the wings that make the mitzvah fly up to the higher levels. And you do a mitzvah without the feelings, without the love, and without the fear, it's like very dry, and it remains here, it does not fly up into the higher levels. And here comes the Alter Rebbe to explain why this is necessary. And he begins with what is the basic principle, what is the basic thing that one must have is the fear of Hashem, the fear of God. And although we explained before that the mitzvah, when we do a mitzvah with love, the love is like the engine that motivates us to do the positive mitzvahs. Just like when you love someone, you're going to do anything for the person. And the fear, when you have a fear of Hashem, and of course we're going to explain what it means, the fear of Hashem. So when you have the fear of Hashem, it stops a person from doing something, the prohibitions, something that God doesn't want. Just like when you fear someone, you're not going to go against them. So things like the love motivates, this is the engine that motivates the positive mitzvahs. The fear is something that motivates the negative mitzvahs, the prohibitions. But in the same time, says the Alter Rebbe, it's not enough. If you serve Hashem only because out of love, even if you're motivated and you're doing the mitzvah, it is not doing the mitzvah in the fullest proper way. Why? Because at the end of the day, when you're doing something because you love Hashem, in a sense, you're doing it for yourself. The idea of fear of Hashem is the contemplation about we are nothing. We are in the presence of Hashem and we're doing everything for Hashem, not because we love to do that, not because we understand that this is the right thing to do and we will love to do it and makes us feel good. So every time you do a mitzvah, you have to have that basic understanding of doing the mitzvah, not only because of the love of Hashem, but also out of fear and awe to Hashem. So let's see inside the Tanya, the beginning of chapter 41, the lesson of yesterday, Shabbos, the 17th day of Nisan. Says the Alter Rebbe, B'rom tzarich liyos lezikoroin tamid. One must, however, constantly bear in mind Reishis or Avodah ve'ikaro ve'sharosha. What is the beginning of divine service as well as its core and root? It's the beginning of the service of Hashem. It is the core of the service of Hashem. And the root, meaning just like a root of a tree. Every part of the tree is nourished by the root. The same thing. That what the Alter Rebbe is going to explain, the concept of the fear of Hashem serves as a root that in every part of your day, every part of your life is nourished by this understanding the fear of God, the awe of Hashem. And that's what the Alter Rebbe goes to explain. V'hu, ki af she'ayira yishirish lesu mira, ve'a'ava leva'asei tov. This means that although fear is the root of turn away from evil, and love is the root of do good, as we just explained. When you love someone, you do something what he likes. When you fear someone, you abstain from doing something he doesn't like. Nevertheless, af al pikein, says the Alter Rebbe, lo died le'oire ra'ava levada leva'asei tov. It is not sufficient to awaken the love alone to do good. But at the very least, before performing a positive command, one must first arouse the innate fear which lies hidden in the heart of every Jew. As explained before and will be explained further in these few chapters, there is different levels of fear of Hashem. There is fear of God, that is, we call it the fear that is generated as a result of our understanding, contemplation, God's greatness. And that brings upon the person the love and fear of Hashem. And there is a fear of Hashem that is innate. It's natural. It's there in every Jew. A Jew does not want to be separated from Hashem, except that natural love is concealed. It is dormant. And we need to awaken that love. Says the Alter Rebbe, at least the minimum, what must be done as an introduction to serve Hashem, the minimum is to awaken that innate love, that innate fear, the innate fear that we have in us, in each and every one of us. Not to rebel against the Supreme King, the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, has been stated above. So that this fear should manifest itself in his heart, or at least in his mind. So you can have one level of manifesting the fear in the heart. That means that you actually feel that fear of Hashem. But if you're not able to reach that level of manifesting in the heart, that you should feel real fear of Hashem, at least in the mind. At least you awaken that fear of Hashem, that you don't want to be separated from Hashem, and you understand this deeply in your mind. You have a conviction in your mind that therefore you're going to follow and do what Hashem wants. And now the Alter Rebbe goes to explain what are the steps that enables a person to reach to that level, to awaken the fear, the natural fear at least. Says the Alter Rebbe, the Hainu, this means, this means that in order to arouse within himself the latter category of fear, he should at least contemplate in his mind the greatness of the blessed Ein Sof and his kingship. The kingship of God is the kingship of all the worlds. Which extends to all worlds, both higher and lower. Bearing in mind that the greater the king's dominion, the more awe it inspires in his subject, even in human kings. When you're standing in front of a king that rules over one tiny little country, it's not going to be the same awe-inspiring as you're standing in front of a king of a superpower. So certainly when we're talking about contemplating the kingship of God, that is a kingship of all of the worlds, the higher and lower. Not only is he the king, but the kingship of God also permeates the worlds. And let him further consider that he fills all worlds, animating them with an indwelling life force that created beings can experience and comprehend. That Hashem is king is not just ruling over the worlds, he is the one that fills the world, just like the neshama fills the body. Not only that, it's even greater than that. V'soivev kalamim, and encompasses all worlds. Meaning, he also animates them with a life force that transcends the experience and comprehension of created beings. So when you're talking about the soul, the definition of the soul is that it fills the body, animates the body. But by God, it is only one tiny ray of his light that it fills the world. He himself is encompassing the world. It's above. Even that is not the ultimate level of the essence of Hashem. But when you think about this greatness of Hashem, he fills the world, he encompasses the world. That means all of the world, the higher and the lower, they're all the same, they're all equal in front of him. And as it is written, do I not fill heaven and earth, meaning heaven and earth equally? The higher worlds and the lower worlds. So that is first step. Then what do you think further? Hashem, although he is the king of all the worlds, nevertheless, he leaves everything aside. What does God focus on? He focuses on you. He focuses on the Jew. That the Jew should make him king. The Jew should become the one to fulfill his commands. So, when you're talking about becoming king, to be a king of something, to become a subject of a king, you have to have some type of a relationship to the king. You have to have a certain level compared to the king. A human being is very powerful. If you're going to tell him you're going to become a king and a bunch of ants, that's a joke. The ants, and they're not in the level. But yet, all of the world, the higher worlds and the lower world, the spiritual world, God does not become king on them. He elevates us by choosing us to become his subject, by giving us his commandments. He then elevates us to become in the level that we can make him as king. So Hashem sets aside all of the higher and lower worlds, and where does he focuses his kingship? Upon each and every one of us. That's what Alter Rebbe says, yet he leaves aside the creatures of the higher worlds and the creatures of the lower worlds. He uniquely bestows his kingship upon his people Israel in general, because God is known as King of Israel, ve'olav bifrat, and upon him in particular. You can't just say, okay, Hashem is the king of all the Jewish people, so if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. That's not how you think. Hashem focuses on each and every Jew individually. For a man is obligated to say, for my sake was the world created. Every detail, the little details that you're doing is important. And he, for his part, accepts his kingship upon himself. That he be king over him, that we accept Hashem as king over us. To serve him and to do his will in all kinds of servile work. And here the Alter Rebbe continues, and this is the following sentence. The following paragraph is a sentence that the Rebbe taught that they should, little children should memorize. He chose 12 different verses and sentences from the Torah and the sages, and this is one of them, when it says that a person should contemplate that Hashem is standing upon you. Vehine Hashem nitzav olav, and behold, God Himself stands over him. Umeloi chalavetz kevaydoi, and the whole world is full only with His glory. Umabit olav, and He scrutinizes him, in particular, each individual. Uboichen kloyes v'leiv, and He searches his reins and heart, im oivzer kairo, to see if he is serving Him as fitting. That Hashem stands upon you means, in a way, that Hashem is dependent upon you, God, so to speak. So, but that Hashem is waiting for us to accept Him as King and to follow His commands. So every little detail, whatever you do, every moment of the day, Hashem is right there with you. Hashem is right there waiting and seeing to see that you individually, particularly you, serve Him properly in every detail. Therefore, you must serve Him. You must serve in His presence with awe and fear, like one standing before the King. So this is step number one, what you have to focus every day. One must meditate profoundly and at length on this concept, according to the capacity of apprehension of his brain and thought, and the time available to devote to this contemplation. What is this time? When is the most appropriate time to do it? Before he engages in the Torah study, in the study of Torah, or before the performance of commandments, such as before the putting on the tefillin, the talis, and the tefillin. So this meditation will enable him to then serve God with awe. Continues the Alter Rebbe in today's lesson of Sunday, the 18th day of Nisan. The Alter Rebbe continues and says as follows: You should also reflect how the light of the blessed Ein Sof, which encompasses all worlds and pervades all worlds, and which is identical with the higher will, he is clothed in the letters and wisdom of the Torah. So in addition to the very general concept of understanding the accepting God as King, particularly to think about how Hashem Himself is in the letters of Torah and in the wisdom of the Torah. Part of the Torah, of the written law, you learn, you study the letters of the Torah. It has the holiness of the Torah, just the letters itself, even if you don't understand what it says. Then there is the wisdom of the Torah, understanding what God says in the Torah. And the same thing is also with performing the mitzvahs. Or if his meditation takes place before and he puts on the talis and tefillin, he should contemplate how the divine will is clothed in these tzitzis and tefillin, it being God's will that a Jew wear them. And when you do those mitzvahs, you draw upon yourself, upon your neshama, that great essential light of Hashem. And through his recitation or study of the Torah, or by his wearing the tzitzis and the tefillin, which of course with every mitzvah is similar. He draws upon himself his blessed light. That is over the part of God above, which is his soul, which abides in his body and animates it. Meaning the godly soul that we have has two parts. Has the part, the source of the soul, and he has the part of the soul that comes in the body, that animates the body, that is in us. And this light of Hashem is drawn upon the neshama that is in the body. This he does with the intent that it may be absorbed and nullified in his blessed light. And more particularly, the Alter Rebbe says, there is also the particular meditations that each mitzvah has particularly effect in the nullification to Hashem. V'derech prat, specifically, b'tfilin, through the tefillin, libatel v'likolel b'chinas chachmasai u'benasai shebenafshai alikis b'chinas chachmasai u'benasai shel ein sei baruch amolaboshes derech prat b'parshiyas kadesh v'oya keviyacha. So to explain this, in tefillin, in the tefillin we have 4 compartments. The tefillin on the head, each compartment contains one portion of the Torah. In the tefillin on the arm also we have 4 parchments rolled up in one parchment, 4 portions rolled up, written on one parchment that is rolled up. And these 4 portions that are written on the 4 parchments, they correspond to the 4 intellectual levels. What does it mean? We know, generally speaking, if you learned the Chassidus, we learned about the Chachma Bina Das, the 3 intellectual attributes: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Wisdom is when the person receives the flash of an idea. Understanding, the Bina, is understanding, contemplating, and breaking it down to understand the idea. And then knowledge is connecting it, really getting it. But then Chassidus also in the Kabbalah explains that this 3rd level, the Das, is divided into 2. Because the Das is the knowledge, is enabling and developing a feeling based on this understanding. And feelings generally is divided into 2. It's either chesed or gvura, either kindness or severity. So the das, the knowledge, can be drawn in a way of kindness, and can be drawn in a way of severity, of strictness. You like something, or you dislike something, or you have awe of something, or you have a love of something. So these 4 different levels is connected with the 4 portions that are in the tefillin. The portion of Kadesh is connected with the Chachma, with the wisdom. Talks Kadesh Likal Bechor, that the firstborn, the Chachma is considered the first part. Bina, the understanding, talks about Ve'oyaki Sholcha Bincha, if your son will ask you. This already, and this breaking down the wisdom to ask questions, this refers to Bina. Then we have the portion of Shema. Shema talks about love, loving Hashem. V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. So that is the das of love. And then the last portion, V'hayim Shemoa, that talks about the severity if people do not listen to the words of Hashem. That is more of the level of Gevura, the restriction, the severities of the Das. So it says the Alter Rebbe, when you put on tefillin, what is the contemplation to be? The contemplation is that all of these 4 elements, the wisdom, the understanding, the feeling of love, and the feeling of fear, should be used and utilized only to godly things. That's what Alter Rebbe says here. הדרך פרט בתפילין לבוטל ולקולל בבחינס חוכמוסוי בנוסוי שבנפשי לכיס. Specifically through tefillin, he should intend that the attributes of wisdom and understanding, which are in his divine soul, should be nullified and absorbed into the attribute of wisdom and understanding of the blessed Ein Sof. מבחינת חכמוסי בנוסוי של Ein Sof, ברוך הוא, המלובוש is דרך פרט בפרשיס קדש ואויה כביחד. These being clothed in particular in the passages of Kadesh and Ve'oya Kiyaviyacha, as we just explained. That is to say, that he should use the wisdom and understanding that are in his soul for God alone, only in pursuit of Torah and mitzvahs, and for understanding godliness. Similarly, he should intend that the attribute of da'at, the third of the three components of intellect, so that the da'at of it in his soul, which include both chesed, the kindness, and gevurah, the severity, meaning fear and love, in his heart, should be only with a godly thing. It should be nullified and absorbed into the attribute of the higher knowledge, the da'at elyon, the godly knowledge, which comprises kindness and severity, and which is clothed in the passage of Shema and V'hoya im Shemoya. This accords with the statement of the Shulchan Aruch that while putting on the tefillin, one should intend to make one's heart and brain subservient to God. And now, batifas tzitzis yechaven. What do we think when we wear the tzitzis, when we wrap ourselves with a big talus? So, says the Alter Rebbe, what we should contemplate is what it says in the Zohar, to draw upon ourselves the kingdom of Hashem that encompasses us. While putting on tzitzis, one should bear in mind what is written in the Zohar, namely that he should draw upon himself his blessed kingdom, which is the kingdom over all worlds. Nevertheless, he should intend and endeavor to focus God's kingdom specifically over ourselves through this mitzvah. For the commandments of tzitzis is particularly effective in enhancing one's acceptance of the yoke of heaven. This is similar to the commandment, you shall surely set a king over yourself. So what the Rebbe here notes, it says that the verse implies that before one sets a king over himself, he had no king. And it is he who now sets the king over himself. So what he's saying is, even if you don't have this feeling and fear that, oh, there is a king, Hashem is the king, you should put yourself in that state of mind, and that is the power of the talus, when you wear the talus, to put over yourself Hashem as the king. And now says the Rebbe, doing this by contemplating what we just said, not always does a person develop a feeling in his heart, but nevertheless, when you take upon yourself Hashem is king, even if you don't feel it in the heart, but you take it upon yourself and you act accordingly, that is considered serving Hashem with fear. In such a case, meaning having contemplated this matter, then even though after all this meditation, no dread or fear descend upon him in a manifest manner in his heart, Mikol Makom, nevertheless, Me'ach Hashem Mekabel Olav Malchus Shamayim, Umamshich Olav Yiroso Yizborich, Be'izgalus Machshavte Ratzoyno Shebemoichi. Nevertheless, it says, since he accepts the kingdom of heaven upon himself and draws upon himself the fear of him in his conscious thought and rational volition, v'kabala zu yamitis blishum safek, and this submission to God and his fear of him is beyond doubt a sincere one. How do you know it's a sincere one? Says the Alter Rebbe, because that's our nature. It is there. It is deep in our soul. We just have to reveal it. For it is the nature of all Jewish souls not to rebel against the Blessed Holy One. Then the Torah that he studies, or the commandment that he performs, because of his submission to the heavenly yoke, and because of the fear that he has drawn into his mind, then those are termed complete service of the king that can result only from a fear of God. As the Alter Rebbe soon goes on to say, like all service performed by a servant for his master or king, which is of course prompted by fear and awe. So that is when you do it with this contemplation of the fear. At least what we just explained, the minimal level of fear. However, if a person only serves Hashem out of love, it may sound good, may sound beautiful, but you're lacking the service of Hashem. In a sense, you're serving yourself. You love to do it. On the other hand, if one studies Torah and performs a commandment with love alone, in order to cleave to him through the study of his Torah and the performance of his commandments, then this is not termed service of a servant. And that is not a complete service. Yes, you're doing the right thing, you're doing a good thing, but at the end of the day, Hashem wants us to serve Hashem completely. As the Torah says, whereas the Torah has declared, you shall serve, you should serve the Lord your God. This verb is cognate with the noun eved, servant, and thus signifies service motivated by the fear and awe of God. And is likewise written in another verse, it says, him shall you serve, ta'avoidu. As explained in the Zoya Parshas Behar, just like the knocks on which one first places a yoke in order to make it useful to the world, so too, so too must the human being first of all, submit to the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, and only then engage in divine service. And if this submission is not found in him, holiness cannot rest within him. And of course, whenever you do a mitzvah, even if you don't have, we have to make sure, we have to make clear and to understand. It doesn't mean that when you do a mitzvah and you don't have this type of fear, there's no holiness. Every mitzvah is holy. Every time you do a mitzvah, you bring holiness. But we're talking about holiness that is revealed in you. Holiness that would be revealed is only when you do it with this concept of serving Hashem, not just out of love, but out of fear and submission, nullification to Hashem. Shom daf kuf yud aleph amud beis shekol adam tzarich liyas b'shtei pchinos madregas, and in Raya Me'imna it is written that every man must, in his divine service, belong to two categories There's two categories and levels. What are the two categories and levels? Namely, the category of a servant who serves his master out of fear, and the category of a son who serves his father out of love. Now the Alter Rebbe concludes here this part and saying that although there may be a kind of love that is also completely selfless love, the some kind of love that a son loves his father, and he's going to give himself completely away and is not feeling himself at all. So the Alter Rebbe, this level of love must have the higher level of fear in order to get to that level of love. And although one may find a son who is also a servant, it is impossible to attain to this degree without a prerequisite of the higher level of fear and awe known as Yira Ilah. That will be explained later on in the next few chapters, as is known to the initiated. So it is clear from all of the above that even if one loves God but lacks a fear of Him, his spiritual labors will not be of the kind that the Torah calls avodah, divine service. And should he fail in his attempt at awakening a fear of God in his heart, he should at least arouse a feeling of fear and awe in his mind, to have a conviction that this is the right thing to do because of the fear of Hashem. This is the end of today's shir. We'll see you, Mitzvah Hashem, tomorrow. Have a good night.